To understand why Saudi Arabia is failing with the world's most expensive plan, imagine a luxury resort rising straight out of the Saudi desert. Glass walls polished like mirrors, reflecting the harsh sun. Massive air conditioning units running day and night to keep the lobby at a crisp temperature. Vast fields of solar panels stretching across the roof. Everything you see is perfectly designed to sell one specific promise, the promise that the desert has been conquered. But every single afternoon, the desert sends something back. It is not an invading army. It is not an earthquake. It is not a structural collapse. It is just dust. A single particle, much smaller than a human hair, gently lands on the pristine glass facade. Another slips silently into a heavy-duty air filter. Another blocks a microscopic fraction of a solar panel. On its own, one grain of sand means absolutely nothing, but billions of grains, arriving every single day across thousands of interconnected buildings, can turn a glittering tourism dream into a relentless maintenance machine with no off switch. We are used to watching massive engineering failures in the form of falling bridges or sinking foundations. But what if the real enemy of Saudi tourism is not structural failure at all? What if the desert is quietly reclaiming these billion-dollar investments before they even fully open? To understand the true threat to the most ambitious construction project in human history, we need to stop looking at the towering skylines. We need to look much closer. We need to start following one single grain of dust. Saudi Arabia is not just building hotels. It is attempting to engineer a completely new national identity. Through the lens of Vision 2030, the kingdom is pouring upwards of $1 trillion into shifting its economy away from oil. They are constructing megaprojects like NEOM, the Red Sea destinations, Qiddiya, and Diriyah. These are not merely real estate ventures. They are massive jigsaw pieces of a post-oil promise. A promise that Saudi Arabia will become the ultimate global destination for entertainment, luxury hospitality, and high-tech living. But there is a fundamental law of architecture that you cannot escape. The more destinations you build, the more surfaces you create. Every new luxury hotel means thousands of square meters of glass. Every new smart city means miles of exposed sensor networks, pedestrian walkways, and outdoor cooling systems. Every new sustainable initiative means millions of solar panels facing the open sky. Saudi Arabia is not just building destinations, it is building surfaces, and every new surface becomes another place where the desert atmosphere can land. Are they expanding their tourism empire faster than they can figure out how to defend it from the local climate? When you build an entire economy based on flawless aesthetics, the environment itself becomes your biggest daily liability. If you look at the promotional brochures and the architectural renderings, the vision is breathtaking. You see crystal-clear turquoise waters. You see tourists in light clothing, enjoying perfectly climate-controlled open spaces. You see gleaming facades capturing the sunlight, and high-tech renewable energy systems powering the future. The projects are very real. The funding is real. The engineering talent is among the best in the world. But what the brochure completely crops out of the frame is the invisible army required to maintain that illusion. The brochures do not show the exhausted window cleaning crews suspended hundreds of feet in the air every single week. They do not show the massive stockpiles of replacement air filters sitting in underground warehouses. They do not highlight the complex scheduling algorithms just to figure out when to wash the solar farms. Luxury tourism is entirely about control. Guests pay thousands of dollars a night to experience an environment that feels effortless and perfectly curated. The danger to Vision 2030 is not that these incredible resorts are fake. The real danger is that the operating cost to keep them looking like the brochure is entirely real. Many people assume that dust in the Middle East is just a minor inconvenience. a background detail that you can simply wipe away with a damp cloth. But Saudi dust is a complex and aggressive force. This is a region defined by arid conditions, massive local dust sources, and seasonal shamal winds that can carry thick clouds of particulate matter across the peninsula. Dust storms are not rare, once-in-a-lifetime events here. They are a predictable, recurring part of the atmospheric cycle. And we are not just talking about soft dirt. Desert sand is uniquely problematic. Because it is shaped by wind rather than water, the microscopic grains are incredibly smooth and round. That brings up the great architectural irony of the Middle East. They have endless oceans of sand, yet they have to import river sand from abroad just to mix strong concrete. But when the wind whips these smooth desert grains into the air, the intense friction charges them with static electricity. When they finally hit a high-end glass facade, they do not just bounce off. They cling to the surface like tiny magnets, carrying abrasive silicates and chemical compositions that interact with moisture to bake stubbornly onto the building. What happens when an entire economic sector depends on perfect visibility and perfectly flawless surfaces in a country where the atmosphere keeps weaponizing electrically charged particles? You get an environment that constantly attacks the very concept of luxury. To fight back, the operator has to spend money, day after day, just to reset the baseline to normal. Let us look at the first point of failure in the maintenance trap: the facade. Glass is the universal architectural language of modern luxury. It represents transparency, modernity, and seamless integration with the environment. But in the Arabian desert, wind carrying fine sand and dust acts like a natural sandblasting machine. A single collision from a dust particle does not shatter a window. However, millions of tiny impacts over months and years create microscopic scratches on the surface. Slowly, the glass begins to lose its absolute clarity. It starts to look cloudy. It loses the expensive, crystalline shine that defines high-end real estate. For a luxury resort, a cloudy window or a dusty facade is not a minor aesthetic issue. It is a fundamental breach of the brand promise. Guests who pay a premium do not want to look through a murky window at the Red Sea. They do not want to see the maintenance reality. They are paying to exist inside a perfectly controlled dream. Is it possible that a luxury empire does not collapse from structural failure, but simply because the buildings stop looking expensive? To prevent this, the frequency of cleaning must be dialed up to extreme levels, turning window washing from a routine task into a permanent, heavily funded operation. While the glass takes the aesthetic damage, the most expensive battle is happening out of sight. It is happening inside the mechanical lungs of the buildings. In the Gulf region, air conditioning is not a luxury amenity. It is the absolute core requirement for human habitation. A luxury hotel must maintain a continuous supply of cool, clean, and perfectly stabilized air. When you pull outside air into a massive building in a dusty environment, that dust immediately attacks the filtration systems. The pre-filters get clogged faster than in any other climate. When a filter gets dirty, it creates what engineers call a pressure drop. The air cannot flow through easily. So what does the system do? The massive fans have to work significantly harder to push the same amount of air through the choked filters. Working harder means drawing more electricity. The system experiences a massive energy spike, but it does not stop there. The fine dust that slips past the filters lands on the condenser coils. A dusty coil cannot transfer heat effectively. The entire cooling cycle becomes sluggish and incredibly inefficient. Parts wear out faster. Compressors burn out prematurely. The guest sleeping in the suite only feels the cool, comfortable air. They have no idea what is happening in the mechanical rooms. But the operator sees the truth. The more dust the system captures, the more expensive clean air becomes. Every single breath of conditioned air slowly drives up the operational deficit. This brings us to the most profound contradiction of the Saudi megaprojects: the promise of sustainable, regenerative tourism. Many of these new destinations proudly market themselves as being completely off-grid, powered by massive solar farms and renewable energy. This is a brilliant marketing strategy. But solar power, while clean, requires an exceptionally clean environment to function. When a dust storm rolls through, a thick layer of fine particles settles over the solar modules. This layer literally blocks the sunlight from reaching the photovoltaic cells. In severe cases, the energy output of a solar array can plummet by up to 30% in just a matter of days. A 30% drop across a massive luxury resort does not just mean the lights dim, it forces operators to suddenly buy expensive emergency power from the grid or fire up backup generators, instantly adding thousands of unbudgeted dollars to the daily operating cost. So the panels must be cleaned constantly. But how do you clean millions of square meters of delicate solar panels in a desert? Industry averages show that washing just 1 megawatt of solar capacity can require up to 2,000 gallons of highly purified water. For a destination boasting hundreds of megawatts, that is an astronomical water bill. This creates what we can call the water paradox. Saudi Arabia relies heavily on desalination plants to produce fresh water from the ocean. Desalination is a highly energy-intensive process. Are they burning massive amounts of energy to run desalination plants, just to produce the water needed to wash the dust off the solar panels that are supposed to provide clean energy? Solar power may be conceptually clean, but in the desert, keeping solar power clean is an incredibly resource-heavy operation of its own. When you combine these three impacts, the aesthetic, the mechanical, and the energy, you start to see the real shape of the problem. Dust does not need to destroy a system to win. It simply makes every single system more expensive to operate at the exact same time. This is the maintenance trap. It is a multi-layered financial bleed. First, the aesthetic maintenance drains capital through constant washing and facade care to preserve the luxury illusion. Second, the mechanical maintenance forces operators to buy replacement parts, upgrade filters, and hire larger technical crews to keep the lungs of the building breathing. Third, the energy maintenance traps them in a cycle of reduced power output and high cleaning costs just to keep the lights on. A harsh dust storm might blow through the region and settle in just a few hours. The storm is temporary, but the trace of that storm remains deeply embedded in the filters, baked onto the solar panels, jammed inside the cooling coils, and permanently written into the maintenance budget for the next quarter. The operating margins, the profit that makes these massive investments viable, begin to shrink under the weight of endless cleaning. If you read the mainstream financial news, you will see a lot of speculation about what could threaten Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Analysts will point to the fluctuating price of global oil. They will talk about foreign direct investment hesitations. They will discuss geopolitical tensions or the intense pressure of construction deadlines. These are all valid concerns, but they are often false causes when it comes to the long-term survival of a specific tourism destination. Capital can be reprioritized by the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Construction timelines can easily be revised and pushed back. Architectural renderings can be redesigned to lower initial building costs. But the desert does not renegotiate. The deepest layer of risk is the daily operating model. The fundamental question is not just whether Saudi Arabia has the wealth to build these spectacular structures. History shows they can build anything they want. The real question is whether the economic model of hyper-luxury tourism can survive in an environment where the artificial paradise must be physically and financially defended from the native atmosphere every single day. Of course, any discussion of desert megaprojects leads to an obvious comparison. Look at Dubai. Dubai is the ultimate proof that the Gulf region can successfully create climate-controlled luxury and attract millions of tourists. Dubai did not fail. It is a thriving metropolis. But the lesson to take away from Dubai is not that humanity has permanently defeated the desert. The real lesson is that Dubai had to construct a colossal, hyper-dense maintenance machine to keep the desert on the outside of the glass. Over decades, they built an intricate logistics network, a highly experienced maintenance culture, and a concentrated tourism hub that shares infrastructure. Saudi Arabia is attempting to replicate and expand that model on a vastly different scale. They are building multiple, entirely new destinations simultaneously, spread out over hundreds of miles of coastline and harsh terrain. Many of these locations are completely isolated, lacking the deep, overlapping support infrastructure that a dense city like Dubai enjoys. So the critical question is not whether Saudi Arabia can simply copy Dubai. The question is Saudi Arabia building isolated destinations faster than it can build the massive, decentralized maintenance systems required to defend them? Can they afford the daily upkeep of a bigger, wider, and much more exposed version of Dubai? This is not a story of guaranteed doom. Engineering always finds a way forward, but it comes down to choosing which price you are willing to pay. There are three potential paths out of this maintenance trap. The first path is to simply build a bigger machine. Accept the massive operating costs. Install military-grade filtration systems. Deploy thousands of automated cleaning robots. Hire armies of maintenance workers. Utilize advanced predictive AI to track dust storms. This path protects the luxury vision entirely, but it is financially exhausting because you have to pay the bill forever. The second path is to design against the dust from the very beginning. Stop designing buildings that look like they belong in a temperate European city. Use less glass in high-impact zones. Build facades with materials that actually resist abrasion. Design natural airlocks and utilize positive building pressure to force dust out before it settles. This requires compromising on the absolute transparency of modern luxury, but it drastically reduces the daily bleeding of capital. The third path is the most radical. Reduce the exposure load. Stop fighting the desert and start working with it. Accept indigenous architectural principles that naturally manage heat and dust without requiring massive mechanical intervention. Move away from the delicate glass luxury aesthetic and embrace a design language that acknowledges the reality of the environment. A highly expensive, upgraded air filter can protect one hotel suite, but better fundamental planning is the only thing that can protect the long-term economics of an entire destination. Imagine that luxury resort again, the morning after a major dust storm. The intense winds have finally died down. The sun rises, and the vast architecture of the Megaproject is still standing tall against the horizon. The glass has not shattered. The foundation has not moved. Inside, wealthy guests are waking up, ordering room service, and walking down perfectly chilled corridors. To the untrained eye, everything looks completely normal. The system held together. But the dust did not just disappear. It is packed tightly inside the secondary air filters. It is baked onto the edges of the solar array. It is jammed deep inside the condenser coils on the roof. It is trapped in the microscopic grooves of the sliding balcony doors. Saudi Arabia may very well succeed in building the grand tourism empire it has promised the world. But every single empire in history comes with a permanent cost of upkeep. And in this desert environment, that cost does not arrive in the form of a dramatic collapse. It arrives silently, steadily, one grain at a time. This documentary is an independent analysis based on publicly available data, engineering research, and project information. It is not financial, investment, architectural, or travel advice. If this changed the way you look at Gulf Megaprojects, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments below, which hidden maintenance system or engineering challenge should we investigate next?